story called A Bearable Lightness of Being. It's the first story I ever published, maybe wrote, I've forgotten. It was 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, and the blinds were still closed, and so the house was gloomy, and the doorbell jangled like a nerve spasm. It shot through the books, and the junk on the bed, and the bed whirl had been maybe across an ocean or two. She jumped. She lost her place. The pen rolled away down the crack against the wall, and she was annoyed. Finding objects under beds, in the dust pile of bobby pins and pencils and scratched on envelopes, she hated as much as she hated scrambling up on a Sunday morning. Nobody came to the door you didn't know were coming, except some entrepreneur who wanted to mow the lawn or clean the gutter or rake the leaves. She stumbled to the closet. It opened off the bathroom, not the bedroom, because of some strange door-changing arrangement of 2 owners ago. Petticoats and yanked-off blouses and skirts and shorts and belts clogged up all the hooks, but no bathrobe. That showed up under the clothes and behind them in a tangle of clothes hangers that she discovered were stuck in the buttonholes. And anyway, why did she have to rush out and lose her train of thought so she could tell somebody no? But she was doing it, except rushing. She couldn't do that because she had to pull every coat hanger out of every buttonhole. And when the mock velvet, that is luxurious and red, like yes, she loved, and when you really didn't know you might, who might be at the door, you might as well not wear the gray bathrobe, in parentheses. When that was pulled around her and she was poking at the buttons, she pounded through the bedroom and out the living room. She looked through the 3-stepped, hand-sized windows in the door and then held still. She was staring at the oddly confident hand of a tall blond man with his back to her. His long-fingered hand, parentheses on that she could see even the tufts of the blondness, was laid high over his head, casually resting on the post of her porch as if lighted for display. So she had to fight a few things out before she opened the door, like her over-susceptibility to the peculiarly masculine, graceful confidence in that bony blonde hand. No, it wasn't quite her Dutchman. Texas men could stand with their tall, indifferent grace as well as Dutchmen. And the body shape was somehow wrong for Lutz. Only the momentary jarring threw her out of gear, shifted her mood absurdly. And then, when she had drawn herself back up and adjusted a little to take in again that this was not the man she wanted, then she tried to figure out how she could drum up what the situation called for. This man, after all, had jolted her from bed, and now he was damned uninterested about it, staying turned away across the porch and looking out at trees, pretending to be at home with the birds and squirrels. So then, she would stop still, too, with her hand unturned on the key. She'd rushed out, tearing buttonholes for a man who draped his long, white, bony fingers on her post and forgotten her, acted like he'd forgotten her, because he had to have heard her pounding through the house. Parentheses, the house was wooden and all too creakingly human. Close parentheses. But he paraded his arrogance so casually her annoyance couldn't get rooted. What she should feel wouldn't come. The truth was more a far-dawning recognition, not of the man because he couldn't be Lutz. Her willing that struck on the skeleton thinness of this ghost, but of the air this scene was growing in, of its mesmerizing kind of atmosphere. Still, she pulled herself up. She could hold to a minimal idea of what people could expect from one another on a Sunday morning. She turned the key. It was the clang of an empty oil drum. It made the man grow even stiller, she sensed. She imitated him because that was the way things were going. It was the only thing she could do. He wasn't playing fair. He wasn't taking his turn. He wasn't turning around to break whatever it was he'd set up. So they stood, Maybe it was only a few seconds. Who could know with silent dancing? And she, weakling, broke through it again. She pulled the door open, and this time he acknowledged her, but only by shifting his weight from one hand on the post to his elbow and his hand on the post, not by turning around. But whatever he was doing worked, because now it wasn't possible to crash through the vacuum between the porch post and the door. It was inconceivable to say yes. If she thought she'd scrambled out of bed for a beggar at the door, then their places were switched. She was the beggar. The wind shifted. It felt part of this man's will, and made the thinnish Sunday light flutter and the trees sound like rain. It was the man, handing over the kind of silence that made you hear such things. 1,000 miles away, a little girl voice called, "My turn, my turn." If she could get through to any honesty, she would admit this peculiar situation wasn't unknown to her. The closed circle of it, the audacity of it, was right because it was Lute's way, parentheses, the way she kept recreating Lute's way, and who knew, maybe she'd caught Lute's eye in the drizzling dusk in Garner and Smith bookshop because she dreamed of a man who had his way of knowing things, close parentheses. When he'd materialized in the 2 or 3 times over the last 10 years, when he'd materialized from Holland or from Togoland, or from the outpost of Iceland, or from wherever it was he'd heard about somebody trying to make new soil out of used up earth, literally make new loam out of the rocks and make the earth grow fruit and nuts like fruit and nuts were supposed to grow. Then, after he'd incarnated with his hard, man-smelling shoulders, he disappeared as lightly, and only left her time. His restless shoulder flesh was not for holding. Even to keep guessing at the feel of his unflesh, she had to practice yoga and read poetry and whatever came to hand, mostly tell herself stories. So, this little piece of theater with a probably stranger's, atmosphere was practice that she needed. She'd vowed, and she'd never been in the exact right mood to test this vow when Lutz was around her. She'd vowed that never, never, or never again would she ask Lutz questions. If he came like water, he would go like air. And this morning, at last, was in the spirit of her vow, and the best rehearsal she had had. Not only not to ask a question, and not to say a word, but not even to ask the person she wasn't saying her words to who he was, and that some maybe stranger had come to play out her daydreams didn't surprise her at all, because she had at least discovered that the pattern of things was nothing if not a tissue of these supposed coincidences when a tall and bony Dutch-like man is drawn to a Sunday morning house, and not by chance. Parentheses, if a person didn't know these things worked by what they had the spirit to see and not by chance, then they wouldn't even see something peculiar enough to call it chance. And when some halfway person saw enough to call it chance, it was just too bad that so few of them went on to see this was the only way that real things happened, this so-called chance, end parentheses. She held back. She didn't any longer want him to turn around. It was the expectation in her muscles that made her, in the brimming rightness of the silence, restless. She pushed down the handle to the screen door and put her bare foot out through the red mock velvet and slid out the screen door to the right, her hands straight down behind her, finishing the almost quiet shutting of the screen, and then deliberately she walked barefoot over the leaf-sprinkled wood floor and stood a few feet away around the corner of the rail from where he was looking up in trees. He didn't quite turn toward her, but he let out, hoarse, a syllable she couldn't make out, except it was an open syllable, a waiting one. She left it waiting. His left hand was still on the post, but his right hand he had reached out. reached down, so that only the tip of his longest finger touched lightly on the rail, and the rest of the hand was poised in a delicacy that was so frail and so decided, or something like decided, so bonily masculine, that the hand was what she stared at. She didn't need to look up to know there must be some perfectly empirical, down-to-earth explanation for his shape-shifting, like pounds that melted off in Togoland. She didn't need to look up, because there might be some man in Texas who took off with Lutz's Flying Dutchman wings. But there wasn't any other man with air-light, see-through bone hands, hands that could reach anywhere like Lutz's, and so it was his hand she kept her eyes on while she felt herself sit back against the rail on her genuine red velvet gown. And when he turned toward her, enough to see her from an angle, forever Lutz was angles, she knew she must be smiling, because she could feel her smiling catching on his face. And she knew she laughed when she heard herself. But before she let his hand come to touch her face, she had to pick it up and wonder at his fingers, and she had to feel the play that was taking over his smile, while he magnanimously allowed her from his height, as he magnanimously allowed her every now and then to study what it was in his hand. Maybe it was in his hand that gave some clue to the heart of his mystery. The end. That was the first story I ever published.